It started with a photograph. Mira scrolled through an online travel forum late one night, sleepless, restless, lonely, when she stumbled upon an image of a mist-covered valley in British Columbia. The caption read, "Sometimes the wild knows us better than people do." The man behind the lens was Daniel Cross, a Canadian wildlife photographer whose gallery was filled with haunting landscapes and quiet, almost spiritual portraits of animals in their natural solitude. She commented without thinking, "It looks like peace itself." He replied within minutes, "Peace only visits those who dare to chase it." That was how it began. Weeks turned into months of messages, calls, and letters, real, handwritten letters sealed with his looping signature and the faint scent of pine. Daniel spoke like a poet trapped in a hunter's body. He told her about the silence of snow, the cry of wolves echoing through frozen valleys, and how loneliness could become a kind of companion if you learned to listen. Mira was drawn to him like frost to glass. He listened, really listened, when she spoke about her failed engagement, her quiet apartment in London, her fear that she had somehow missed the life she was meant to live. Daniel's voice would soften through the phone. "Maybe the life you're meant for isn't in the city at all, Mira. Maybe it's waiting where the air still remembers how to breathe." Soon, their connection stopped feeling digital. It felt inevitable. When he sent her a video from a snow-covered trail, the camera turning from a breathtaking ridge to his smiling face, something inside her cracked open. She imagined standing beside him, the world endless and raw. The next morning, she caught herself pricing plane tickets to Vancouver. Then, one evening in February, a small box arrived by post. Inside was a delicate silver ring, carved with the outline of a mountain range. His note read, "You said you wanted to feel alive again. Come find me. Let's start something real." Her heart raced. She called him instantly. "Are you serious?" she whispered. "As serious as the sunrise," he said, his voice calm, steady. "Move here. With me." It wasn't logic that answered, it was longing. Within weeks, Mira sold her furniture, quit her marketing job, and sublet her flat. Friends tried to talk her out of it. Her sister pleaded, "You barely know him." Mira smiled, brushing it off with a kind of blind faith only love could build. "Sometimes," she said, "you just know." The night before her flight, she packed her last suitcase and stood by the window. Rain streaked the glass like nervous tears. London's skyline blinked in the distance, a life dissolving behind her. She whispered to her reflection, "You're doing the right thing. You deserve this." Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel lit up the screen. "Can't wait to see you, my wild heart." He attached a photo. A cabin at the edge of a forest, snow piled on the roof, smoke curling from the chimney. It looked like something out of a fairy tale. Mira smiled, holding the phone against her chest. She didn't notice the faint silhouette behind the cabin window, a shadow that didn't quite belong to Daniel. At Heathrow the next morning, she boarded her flight with trembling hands and a heart full of hope. She gazed out the window as the city disappeared beneath the sheet of clouds. The pilot's voice echoed softly, "Next stop, Vancouver." She closed her eyes and imagined Daniel waiting for her at the arrival's gate, the first day of their forever. But as the plane cut through the clouds, somewhere deep inside, an unease stirred, quiet, fleeting, but real. It was the kind of instinct that warns you before the storm comes. And far across the ocean, in the cold breath of the Canadian mountains, that storm was already waiting for her. The plane touched down in Vancouver under a slate-gray sky. Mira's pulse thrummed with nervous excitement as she pressed her face to the window, watching raindrops trail like silver threads down the glass. Somewhere beyond the runway, Daniel was waiting. Her future, her home, her beginning. At customs, she rehearsed how it would go. He'd run to her, lift her in his arms, kiss her like in the letters he used to write. "You're my wild heart," he'd said. The words replayed in her mind as she wheeled her suitcase through the sliding doors into the arrival's hall. But Daniel didn't rush forward. He stood still among the crowd, tall, wrapped in a dark coat, eyes hidden beneath the brim of a cap. His smile flickered only for a second before disappearing, replaced by something unreadable. "Mira," he said, his voice calm but distant. "Daniel," she breathed, stepping into his arms. His embrace was brief, almost formal. The scent of pine and smoke clung to him, familiar yet sharp. "You look tired," he said, taking her bag. "The drive's a bit long. Let's get going." "The drive?" she asked, glancing around. "I thought we were staying in the city." "Change of plans," he cut in. "My apartment's under renovation. We'll stay at my cabin for a few days. It's peaceful. You'll like it." She wanted to protest, but stopped herself. Love required patience, didn't it? Besides, the way he said peaceful sounded almost like safe. They drove for hours, the city lights fading behind them until only forest remained, vast, endless, alive with whispering rain. Mira tried to make conversation, but Daniel's answers came in clipped sentences. He spoke about wildlife cameras, about bears that wandered too close to the cabin. His voice carried the weight of distraction. When they finally arrived, the headlights illuminated a small wooden house crouched beneath tall pines. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. It wasn't the cozy cottage from his photo. This one looked older, lonelier, as if time itself had stopped visiting. "This is different," Mira said softly. Daniel smiled faintly. Pictures never tell the whole truth. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit. A single oil lamp flickered on the table beside a stack of old film reels. Animal skulls and photographs lined the walls. Wolves, ravens, frozen rivers. Mira shivered. Daniel poured her tea from an iron kettle. "It's only temporary," he said again, eyes never leaving the window. "You'll see. You'll love it here." But that night, lying awake in the cold, unfamiliar bed, she heard the forest breathing outside. The creak of trees, the crack of branches. Somewhere far off, a low howl echoed. Daniel was already asleep beside her, or pretending to be. Mira turned her face toward him, studying his stillness. He looked like a man carved from ice, beautiful, unreachable. Her chest tightened. This wasn't how she had imagined their first night together. There was no laughter, no warmth, only distance that pressed down heavier than the mountain air. Outside, the wind rose suddenly, rattling the window. She flinched. Daniel didn't move. In that moment, Mira realized how far she was from everything she knew, from family, from light, from safety. And as her eyes adjusted to the dark, she noticed something glinting near the back door, a padlock. Heavy. New. She told herself it must be for the tool shed, but a voice deep inside whispered otherwise. Morning arrived shrouded in fog so thick that the trees looked like ghosts. The cabin seemed swallowed by the mountains, a wooden speck adrift in endless gray. Mira stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching the mist curl around the pines like smoke. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled from a hidden stream, the only sound in a world that had gone still. Daniel was already gone. His note sat on the kitchen counter, written in his tight, deliberate handwriting. "Gone for photos. Don't wander too far. Forest's tricky when you're new." Mira smiled faintly, though unease coiled beneath her ribs. She made tea and tried to imagine this as an adventure, not a mistake. Maybe Daniel just needed space. Maybe being back in his element would soften him again. She told herself love was patient. That distance didn't always mean danger. Yet every creak of the cabin seemed to breathe with its own pulse. By noon, she decided to explore the property. The pines stretched high above her, their tips vanishing into the fog. The ground was soft, damp, scattered with deer prints. Then she saw it, behind the cabin. Half hidden by overgrown brush, stood a small shed. Its door was bolted with a heavy padlock. Curiosity tugged at her. She tugged the handle. It didn't budge. Through a narrow crack, she glimpsed something glinting inside, metallic, faintly red-stained. She stepped back, her heart tightening. Old tools, she told herself. Maybe hunting gear. Still, the sight left a sour taste she couldn't name. That evening, Daniel returned, his camera slung over his shoulder, boots caked in mud. His smile looked practiced. "You've been outside." "Just around the cabin," she said carefully. "It's beautiful here." He nodded, brushing past her to pour himself a drink. "Stay close next time. There are bears." There was something final in the way he said it. They ate dinner in near silence. Daniel spoke only of the light in the forest, How it changes everything. How fear and beauty are sometimes the same thing. His eyes gleamed as he spoke, as though he wasn't describing nature at all. That night, Mira woke to the sound of the back door closing. She sat up, pulse racing. Through the window, she saw Daniel walking into the trees, a lantern swinging from his hand. The light bobbed between trunks until it disappeared into darkness. He didn't return for nearly an hour. When he finally came back, his clothes were damp, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't notice her watching. He placed something small and metallic into a drawer, then quietly washed his hands in the sink, scrubbing, again and again, until the water turned pink. Mira lay back, pretending to sleep. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, but she swallowed the fear like poison, convincing herself there had to be a reason. There had to be. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and iron. The locked shed waited behind the cabin, silent and patient, its secret breathing with the forest. And as Mira drifted between fear and denial, she thought she heard a whisper beneath the wind, soft, almost pleading. It sounded like someone calling her name. The morning after Daniel's night walk, the air felt heavier, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. Mira woke to find him sitting at the table, scrolling through his camera. He didn't notice her at first. His expression was distant, almost reverent, as though the images meant something only he could understand. When he finally looked up, his tone was clipped. "Sleep well." She nodded, forcing a smile. "You came in late." "I told you. The forest changes after dark. You see things you can't in daylight." His words hung in the air, strange and cold. After breakfast, Daniel packed his camera gear again and kissed her forehead. The gesture so brief it felt rehearsed. "Be back by evening," he said. Then, as if remembering something, added, "Don't go through my things. Some projects are private." The door shut behind him. The silence that followed was absolute. Mira waited a full half hour before moving. The cabin's floorboards creaked beneath her as she walked toward the study. A narrow room lined with shelves and film canisters. A faint chemical smell lingered there, sharp and metallic. She ran her fingers along the edge of a drawer. Locked. Another drawer below, unlocked. Inside lay a stack of old envelopes, labeled in careful handwriting. Raven Trail, 2019. Elk Ridge, 2020. Coldwater Creek, 2021. Each one held photographs. Her breath caught as she sifted through them. Every picture was of a woman, different faces, different seasons, but all standing in the same kind of place. Misty woods, cliffs, waterfalls. Each looked natural at first, until Mira noticed their expressions. Not smiles. Not peace. Something closer to fear. One woman, her eyes wide, lips parted as if about to scream. Another, half turned, glancing over her shoulder, unaware of the lens watching her. At the back of the stack was an album. Mira opened it slowly. The first page held Daniel's handwriting. The moment before nature takes back what's hers. Her vision blurred. There were dozens of women. No captions. No explanations. Just faces, caught in moments that felt like goodbyes. She dropped the album as a sound outside made her flinch. Boots on the porch. She shoved everything back, her hands trembling. Daniel entered moments later, face calm but eyes sharp. "Exploring. Just tidying up," she said quickly, heart pounding. He watched her too long before smiling. "You shouldn't go through my photos, Mira. They're part of a series I'm working on. Feminine in the Wild. It's about vulnerability. You'd like it." She forced a laugh. They looked intense. "That's the point," he said, pouring coffee. "Fear is honest. People hide behind smiles, but fear." He paused, meeting her gaze. "That's when they show who they really are." The room felt colder. She nodded, pretending to understand, while inside, her stomach twisted. That night, Daniel fell asleep quickly. Mira lay awake, replaying every photo in her mind. The eyes of those women, the same mountain mist curling behind them. Her chest ached with a terrible realization she couldn't yet name. Then she heard it. A faint sound outside the window, a voice, soft and fragile. At first, she thought it was the wind. But then it came again, clearer this time, carried through the trees. "Mira." She bolted upright. The sound was unmistakably human, a woman's voice, distant but desperate. She crept to the window, pressing her face to the cold glass. The forest was nothing but shadow and fog. Yet for a fleeting second, she thought she saw movement, a pale shape gliding between the trees, hair streaming like smoke. "Daniel," she whispered, but he didn't stir. The voice came again, closer now. "Help me." Mira's pulse thundered. She stepped back from the window, her breath fogging the glass. When she blinked, the shape was gone. Only darkness remained. Somewhere in that darkness, a branch snapped. Then silence. She turned to Daniel, still motionless, his breathing slow and steady. His lips curved slightly, almost like a smile. Mira lay awake until dawn, the echo of that voice tangled in her thoughts. For the first time since arriving, she realized she didn't really know the man lying beside her. And as the morning light crept across the floorboards, she knew she had to find out what else he was hiding, before the mountains decided to keep their secret forever. The next morning, Mira woke to the hollow echo of her name being called from outside. Her pulse spiked, but when she looked through the window, there was only Daniel, standing at the edge of the trees, camera in hand, motionless as if waiting for something to move in the mist. Breakfast was quiet. Daniel spoke only to mention he wanted to show her the river nearby. Mira hesitated but nodded, pretending everything was normal. She slipped her phone into her pocket, relieved to see one bar of signal flicker at the top of the screen. Maybe she could call her sister, even for a minute, just to hear a familiar voice. They walked through the woods, the damp earth soft beneath their boots. Daniel pointed out tracks, deer, fox, bear, with the same calm detachment he used when talking about the weather. The river was narrow but fast-moving, a silver ribbon slicing through moss-covered rocks. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. Mira nodded, distracted. She pulled out her phone, glancing at the signal. 2 bars now. Her heart lifted, but before she could unlock it, Daniel reached for her hand, sudden and gentle. "Careful," he warned. "Slippery here." Her phone slipped from her fingers. Time slowed. The glint of metal, the splash, the current swallowing it whole. She gasped, kneeling at the edge. "No, Daniel, it's my phone." He crouched beside her, expression unreadable. "It was an accident," he said softly. "You shouldn't have brought it so close to the water." She stared at the rushing current, disbelief clawing at her chest. "You could have helped me grab it." He stood, brushing off his hands. "It's just a phone, Mira. Maybe it's better this way. Out here, we can really disconnect." Something in his tone made her throat tighten. Disconnect. That night, she couldn't eat. She sat by the oil lamp, the shadows trembling against the walls. Her world had shrunk to a single point. The cabin, the forest, and Daniel. No phone. No contact. No way out. To keep herself grounded, she found an old notebook in one of Daniel's drawers and began writing. Each page became a fragile lifeline, a way to prove she still existed. Day 17. I dropped my phone. I think he wanted me to. He keeps talking about how peaceful it is without technology, but I can't shake the feeling he's watching me more closely now. Every time I turn, he's already looking. She paused, listening to the cabin breathe around her, the ticking of the old clock, the groan of wood, the whisper of wind at the windows. Daniel was outside again, his lantern moving between the trees. She wrote faster, her handwriting jagged. I think he's watching me even when I sleep. Her pen hovered over the last word as the floor creaked behind her. She froze. "Mira." Daniel's voice drifted through the half-open door. "You should get some rest." Her pulse hammered. "I will," she said, closing the diary quickly. He lingered a moment longer, then the door shut, his footsteps fading into the hallway. Mira stared at the dark window, her reflection trembling in the glass. For a brief second, she thought she saw another face behind hers, a faint outline, eyes wide, mouth open as if warning her. She blinked, and it vanished. The wind howled outside, dragging the sound of the river with it. She closed the diary, slid it beneath her pillow, and whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll find a way out." But somewhere beyond the cabin walls, a single light flickered in the forest, Daniel's lantern, unmoving, as if waiting for her to notice. 3 days passed before Daniel finally said, "We need supplies." The words hit Mira like a breath of air after drowning. Supplies meant roads, people, witnesses. She tried to hide her relief as she climbed into the passenger seat of the truck. The tires crunched over gravel as they wound down the mountain road, the forest thinning into open stretches of mist and silence. Mira watched the signal bars on Daniel's dashboard GPS flicker in and out. Civilization was close, and yet it felt impossibly far. They drove in silence for almost an hour until the outline of a small gas station appeared, a lonely outpost surrounded by pines and fog. A single open sign flickered weakly in the window. Daniel parked, turning to her. "Wait here. I'll just grab a few things." Her heart sank. "I can come with you, can't I?" He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, but stay close." Inside, the air smelled of old coffee and motor oil. A woman in her 50s sat behind the counter, reading a magazine. Mira offered a polite smile. The woman smiled back, tired, kind human. That simple look nearly undid her. Daniel moved to the back aisle, checking batteries and canned food. Myra's pulse quickened. This was her moment. She drifted toward the counter, pretending to browse postcards. Her fingers trembled as she picked one up. A photo of the Vancouver skyline, distant and shining. She slipped her hand into her pocket and pulled out a torn piece of paper she'd hidden earlier, scrawled with desperate words. "Help me. He's not who he says he is. Cabin near Coldwater Ridge. Please." Her voice barely worked. "Could I borrow a pen?" she asked. The woman handed her one, smiling absently. Mira scribbled the final word, then placed the postcard on the counter with the note tucked beneath. Daniel's voice came from behind her, closer than she'd thought. "Ready?" She jumped, forcing a laugh. "Just getting this." He eyed the card. "Tourist now, are we?" "Just a souvenir," she said softly. The woman rang them up. Myra's heart pounded as the postcard and note disappeared under the counter. "Please see it," she begged silently. "Please read it before he comes back." They left moments later, the bell above the door chiming. Daniel tossed a bag of supplies into the truck bed. "You're quiet," he said. "Just tired." "Maybe the mountains are too much for you," he murmured. "People from cities don't last long here." The drive back felt longer, suffocating. Mira tried to memorize landmarks, a crooked signpost, a fallen tree, but the road twisted endlessly, every turn looking the same. When they reached the cabin, Daniel unloaded the supplies without another word. She excused herself, claiming a headache, and locked herself in the bedroom. There, she wrote in her diary with shaking hands. "I did it. I left a note. If she reads it, maybe someone will come. I have to believe that." That night, rain lashed against the windows. Daniel sat by the fire, humming softly while carving something from wood. Mira couldn't make out what it was until he lifted it into the light. A small figure of a woman, hair carved long, eyes wide. Her stomach twisted. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Miles away, the gas station attendant locked up for the night. As she counted the till, something slipped from beneath the register. A crumpled postcard of Vancouver. She frowned, turning it over. The words scrawled across the back made her freeze. Her hand trembled as she whispered, "Oh my God!" But before she could reach for the phone, headlights swept across the front window. A vehicle pulling in, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The attendant's heart raced as a tall figure stepped from the truck, rain dripping from his coat. He smiled through the glass and raised a camera. The morning after the storm, sunlight streamed through the cabin's windows for the first time in days. It should have felt like relief, but Mira couldn't shake the unease curling in her stomach. Daniel was unusually cheerful, humming as he cleaned his camera lenses. "I was thinking," he said over breakfast, "we should go up the ridge today. There's a trail the locals call the Hunter's Path. Perfect light this time of year." Mira hesitated. "All the way up there." He smiled. "You'll love it. Think of it as an adventure. Besides, it's time you saw what brought me here in the first place." There was no arguing without suspicion, so she agreed. They packed lightly, sandwiches, water, and his camera bag. As they set off, the air felt cleaner, thinner. The mountain rose before them like an ancient wall, its slopes veiled in morning mist. The forest floor was damp, soft with pine needles. Each step carried the scent of earth and decay. Daniel walked ahead, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every stone. Mira followed, her heart pounding. She kept glancing at him, studying the way he touched the trees, how his eyes lingered on certain spots longer than others. "You've brought people here before, haven't you?" she asked, her tone light but probing. He glanced back with a faint grin. "A few models. Journalists. You'd be surprised how many people want to be photographed in the wild." His answer sounded rehearsed, the same casual lie repeated too many times. Halfway up, the path narrowed. The trees grew denser, the air colder. Mira stopped to catch her breath and noticed something glinting in the dirt near a cluster of roots. She crouched, brushing away the soil with her fingertips. A small gold earring emerged, delicate, feminine, caked in mud. Her breath caught. Daniel turned just as she lifted it. "Lose something?" he asked, voice calm. "This isn't mine," she said, her voice trembling. "Someone must have dropped it." He studied the jewelry for a moment, then smiled, that slow, unsettling smile that never reached his eyes. "The forest keeps what it wants," he said softly. "You shouldn't disturb it." Mira stared at him, her pulse roaring in her ears. "That doesn't make sense." "Doesn't it?" He crouched beside her, brushing his hand gently against hers. "Nature takes things. People. Time. It's balance. We all end up part of the earth eventually." He stood, slipping the earring into his pocket, before she could protest. "Come on. We're losing light." They climbed higher. The trees thinned, giving way to rocky slopes and the sound of wind howling between cliffs. Mira's legs ached, but fear fueled her. Every instinct screamed that she shouldn't be here. Not with him. Not this far from anyone else. At the summit, Daniel set up his tripod. "Stand over there," he said, pointing to the edge of a ridge. Below, the valley sprawled in endless green. She hesitated. "You want to take my picture?" "You're perfect," he murmured, adjusting the focus. "The light loves you." Mira forced herself to smile, but her body trembled. The wind tugged at her jacket, carrying whispers through the pines below. He clicked the shutter. Once, twice, then again. Each flash of sound echoed like a countdown. When he finally lowered the camera, he stared at her with a strange stillness. "You trust me, don't you, Mira?" She swallowed hard. "Of course." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. That's all that matters." As they began their descent, Mira kept glancing back at the spot where she'd found the earring. She could swear she saw something else glimmering in the dirt, a thin silver chain, half buried. But she didn't dare stop again. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk had settled. Daniel disappeared into the dark room with his camera, humming softly. Mira sat by the window, shaking, the mountain's shadow looming over her. In her diary that night, she wrote, "He smiled when I found the earring, like he was waiting for me to see it." Outside, the wind carried a faint metallic rattle, like jewelry clinking against stone. And from somewhere deep in the forest, a single crow called once and went silent. The morning after the mountain hike, the air felt heavier, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Mira barely slept. Each creak of the cabin made her flinch. Daniel's laughter from the darkroom still echoed in her head, brittle and wrong. She stared at the tiny crack in her windowpane, tracing it with her fingertip. It reminded her of a fracture spreading through glass, quiet, unstoppable. That's what her trust had become, a fracture she could no longer ignore. When Daniel emerged, he was dressed for another outing. "You shouldn't write in that diary so much," he said casually, sipping his coffee. "It keeps you distracted." Mira froze. "How do you know about that?" He smiled thinly. "You talk in your sleep." Something in his tone snapped the last thread of pretense between them. "Daniel," she said softly, "I want to go back. To the city. Just for a few days." His eyes darkened. "You think you can just leave?" Her pulse raced. "I just need space." He slammed the mug down, shattering it. "You ruined it," he hissed. You were perfect, and then you started asking questions. Mira backed away. Ruined what? The pattern, he whispered. The rhythm of things. They always ruin it when they start to doubt. He stepped closer, his voice trembling now, not with anger, but something colder. Do you know why I bring them here? Because the mountains remember. They hold the truth better than people ever can. Mira's breath caught. What did you do to them, Daniel? He tilted his head, eyes glinting with something almost childlike. I showed them beauty before it disappeared. She bolted for the door. Branches tore at her arms as she ran, heart pounding in her ears. She didn't know where she was going, only away from him. The trail twisted upward, slippery from the previous night's rain. Behind her, Daniel's footsteps echoed like an animal stalking prey. Mira. His voice carried through the trees, sharp and furious. You don't understand. I loved you enough to make you part of it. She stumbled on a root, scraping her knee, but kept going. The trees thinned ahead, light flickering between trunks. Freedom. But as she broke into a clearing near the cliffside, Daniel emerged from another path, cutting her off. His face was pale, lips trembling. Why are you running from me? He said softly, stepping closer. You're not supposed to leave before the picture's finished. Stay away from me, she gasped, backing toward the edge. He raised the camera, hanging around his neck. Just one more, he said. One last shot before it all ends. The flash went off. She screamed, blinded by the burst of light. Then his hand shot forward, gripping her wrist. She fought, pulling back with every ounce of strength. Let go. You can't leave me like the others. Her heel slipped on the wet rock. Time fractured a single, suspended second of silence before gravity claimed her. The world tilted, trees spinning above her as she fell backward into the ravine. The air rushed from her lungs as the ground met her with brutal force. Pain exploded through her body, sharp, then fading into a dull, ringing numbness. She tried to move, but her leg was twisted beneath her. Her phone, somehow still in her pocket, slid out and tumbled a few feet away, its cracked screen flickering weakly. Daniel appeared at the ridge above, a black silhouette against the gray sky. He didn't climb down. He only stood there, camera raised, face calm again, like a man at peace with what he'd done. The phone screen blinked one final image before dying. Daniel's figure framed against the light, expression unreadable, the shutter flashing. Then darkness. Wind whispered through the ravine. The forest, once alive with sound, went still. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, faint, approaching. And above, Daniel turned away, disappearing into the trees, as if the mountain itself had swallowed him whole. It was almost 3 weeks before anyone found her words. A pair of hikers, college students from Vancouver, were following an unmarked ridge trail when one of them noticed something odd wedged beneath a boulder. A small, clear plastic bag sealed tight with tape, half buried under fallen leaves. Inside was a notebook, warped by moisture but miraculously intact. The first page read, "If anyone finds this, please don't believe what he tells you." Within hours, the diary was in police hands. Detective Laura Chin flipped through the pages in her office, her gloved fingers trembling slightly. The entries were detailed, desperate, each one a breadcrumb of fear. Mira's neat handwriting grew shakier with every page, the last dated just days before she disappeared. The words that stood out most were underlined twice. He's watching me, even when I sleep. News spread quickly. Missing British woman last seen in the North Shore Mountains. The headlines read. And at the center of every image, every television interview, was Daniel Shaw, the grieving fiancé. He looked the part perfectly. On screen, Daniel wore a simple gray sweater, eyes rimmed red. His voice broke when he spoke of Mira. She was the kindest person I ever met, he said, his fingers tightening on the photo in his hand. We were supposed to start a new life together. I don't understand how this could happen. He paused, lowering his gaze just long enough for cameras to capture his grief. I only hope, wherever she is, she knows I never stopped loving her. Reporters nodded sympathetically. Social media flooded with condolences and theories. Poor man. So tragic. Love cut short. No one questioned how his voice never cracked when the cameras stopped rolling. At night, back in the cabin, Daniel watched the broadcast on mute. His reflection flickered across the TV screen. The same practiced tears, the same trembling hands. Then his smile returned, faint and cold. "You did love me, didn't you?" He whispered toward the darkness, as though she were listening. "You wanted to be part of something eternal." The next morning, police search teams combed the surrounding forests. Dogs barked, searchlights swept through the mist. The area was treacherous, steep cliffs, hidden ravines, and endless pine cover. Each discovery was logged. A torn scarf, a muddy shoe print, a piece of camera strap. But no body. Detective Chen stood on the overlook near the trail's end, staring down into the deep ravine, where rumors claimed Mira might have fallen. The sound of running water below mixed with the wind's low moan. Something about the scene felt wrong, too carefully natural. She didn't just disappear. Chen murmured to the officer beside her. Someone wanted it to look that way. Back at headquarters, the diary was analyzed page by page. Forensic experts noted inconsistencies in Daniel's statements, but there wasn't enough evidence yet. No confession, no body. That night, as the search teams packed up, one officer noticed a faint light flickering from the forest below, as if someone were moving through the trees with a lantern. When they investigated, the light vanished. Only footprints remained, leading toward the deeper woods, the direction of the old wildlife photography routes Daniel once claimed to use. Meanwhile, Daniel appeared once more on national television. "I'll keep searching," he vowed, voice trembling perfectly on cue. "I won't rest until she's found." He placed a single white rose on the base of a missing persons poster, her smiling face frozen forever beside his name. Cameras clicked, flashes burned. Then he turned away, hands in pockets, eyes distant. The forest behind him loomed dark, whispering secrets to the wind. Detective Laura Chen stared at the diary again, its pages now tagged with neon markers and sticky notes. The scent of damp paper filled the evidence room. Every entry Mira had written felt like a whisper from the grave, a trail left behind for someone to follow. Chen had read the diary a dozen times, but tonight, something new caught her eye. Faint pencil marks ran along the outer margins of several pages, numbers barely visible beneath the ink. They didn't seem random. Each set followed a pattern. She leaned closer. "Get me the mapping software," she told the technician. Within minutes, the numbers were on screen, latitude and longitude. The room fell silent. The coordinates pointed deep into the North Shore Mountains, miles from the cabin, far beyond the official search zone. "Was she trying to lead us there?" the young officer asked. Chen's jaw tightened. "No," she said softly. "She was documenting where he took her." The next morning, a small team of officers hiked toward the marked site. The air was colder there, heavier, as if the forest knew what was buried beneath it. Mist clung to the branches, muffling sound. Even the birds were silent. "According to the GPS, we're about 20 meters away," the lead tracker said. He brushed aside some pine needles, uncovering disturbed soil. "Ground's been moved recently." They began to dig. The first shovel hit something soft. It didn't take long. Within the hour, they uncovered human remains, a woman's skeletal frame wrapped in the remnants of a red jacket. The team froze. Chen knelt beside the grave, heart pounding. She whispered a quiet apology before signaling them to continue. Two more graves emerged nearby, each older than the last, bones, torn fabric, fragments of jewelry. The air filled with the smell of wet earth and decay. 3 victims, one officer said, his voice low. "All women, all different years." Chen nodded, her face pale. "He's been doing this for years, and she found out." She looked around, the towering pines, the quiet stream, the distant ridge. "This is his gallery," she murmured. "He photographed them here. Each one, part of his pattern." A forensic photographer snapped pictures while the team marked evidence. Nearby, a fragment of camera lens was found, cracked but intact. The initials DS were scratched faintly along its rim. By sunset, the site buzzed with investigators. Reporters were kept at bay, but the story was already spreading. Serial photographers suspected in mountain killings. At the station, Chen stood before a whiteboard covered in photos, Mira's smiling face in the center, surrounded by images of the newly discovered victims. She felt a chill creep up her spine. Daniel Shaw had vanished 2 days after his last television appearance. His car was found abandoned near the highway, a smashed camera bag on the seat. No trace of him since. Chen picked up Mira's diary again. Her final entry read, "If this ends badly, I hope someone reads this and follows the trail." The mountains remember everything. The words echoed in Chen's head long after she closed the cover. The next morning, she returned to the site with a cadaver dog team to continue searching. As they moved deeper into the forest, one of the dogs barked sharply near an old pine. Something metallic glinted in the soil, a pendant, shaped like a bird. Chen's breath hitched. It wasn't on any of the victims' lists. "This means there's more," she whispered. The forest seemed to exhale around them, branches swaying in slow agreement, the earth whispering secrets long buried. She turned toward the ridge, where mist curled like smoke. Somewhere out there, Daniel was still free. Snow fell in slow, soundless sheets over the Vancouver Police Department as Daniel Shaw was brought in. His hands were cuffed, wrists pale against the metal. For days, he'd evaded capture, hiding deep within the forests he once called his sanctuary. But the cold had done what the police couldn't. It drove him out. Detective Laura Chen stood behind the one-way glass, studying him. He looked thinner, almost ghost-like, but his eyes were steady. Too steady. In the interrogation room, Daniel sat with his elbows resting on the table, fingertips pressed together as though in prayer. The snow outside muted the world, trapping them in a hush that made every breath feel louder. Chen entered, closing the door quietly. "You've been running a long time," she said, "but it's over now." He smiled faintly. "Over." His voice was calm, deliberate. "You think this ends with me in a room?" Chen placed a file on the table, photographs of the graves, of Mira's diary, of the jewelry found beneath the pines. "We found them," she said. "All of them. You took their pictures before you killed them." Daniel leaned back, eyes drifting toward the photos. "Pictures," he murmured. Such a small word for what they were. "Tell me what they were, then." Chen pressed. He looked up, his gaze oddly serene. "Moments. Pure, unfiltered moments of fear. You can't fake that. Not in a studio, not under lights. It's primal. Honest." Chen's stomach turned. "You collected fear." "I preserved it," he corrected. "Every breath, every heartbeat before the end. That's when people show who they really are. I didn't make them afraid. The forest did. I just captured it." "You murdered them," Chen said coldly. He tilted his head. "They followed me. They chose to. Every one of them wanted to see the wild. They wanted to be part of something bigger. I only gave them that." The snow outside thickened, brushing against the window like whispering ghosts. Chen set down a final photograph, one that hadn't been released to the media. It showed Mira's broken phone, the last image it captured. Daniel standing over her body at the edge of the ravine. Something flickered in his eyes then, a brief crack in the calm. "She wasn't supposed to fall," he said softly. "She was supposed to understand. She almost did." Chen leaned closer, and when she didn't, he met her gaze with eerie stillness. "I finished the story." The room fell silent. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock, each second heavier than the last. "You'll never see another forest again," Chen said, her voice steady but low. Daniel smiled, small, almost gentle. "Oh, detective," he whispered, "they'll still see me." Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the city in white silence. As officers led Daniel away, Chen watched through the frost-covered glass. For a brief second, his reflection merged with the swirling snow, a ghost vanishing into the white. Somewhere in the mountains, the wind rose, carrying the faint echo of a camera shutter. Spring came late that year. The snow lingered longer than usual, clinging to the peaks like a memory unwilling to melt. The North Shore Mountains stood quiet again. No police tape, no cameras, no sirens. Only wind and silence. It had been 6 months since Daniel Shaw's arrest. The news had burned bright for weeks, then faded like all tragedies eventually do. People moved on, but the forest didn't. It held its secrets beneath the frost, patient and unchanged. That morning, a small group gathered near the ridge where Mira's diary had first been found. There was no monument, only a simple wooden bench overlooking the valley, her name carved into its surface. Mira Thorne. She loved the light. Detective Laurachin stood among them, hands buried in her coat pockets. The air bit at her cheeks, sharp and clean. She watched as a priest read a short blessing, his voice trembling slightly in the cold. A few of Mira's friends from London had flown in, leaving small white flowers by the bench. No one spoke much. Words felt inadequate against the weight of the mountains. When the ceremony ended, most people began the descent, their footsteps fading down the path. Chen lingered, gazing across the endless white ridges. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay the graves they had uncovered, now fenced, marked, remembered. But Mira's body had never been found. Chen crouched near the edge of the overlook, brushing snow from a cluster of pine needles. "You led us here," she murmured quietly. "You made sure he couldn't hide anymore." As she stood to leave, a voice called from behind. "Detective, you should see this." A park ranger approached, holding a small, mud-streaked object wrapped in cloth. "We were checking runoff channels near the lower trail," he said. "Found this wedged under a fallen log." Chen unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside lay a weather-worn camera, cracked, but intact enough to recognize. Her breath caught. The brand, the strap, it was Daniel's. "Can it still work?" she asked. "We pulled the memory card," the ranger said. "One file survived." Later, back at headquarters, the technicians managed to recover the image. Chen stared at the monitor as it appeared, grainy, blurred around the edges, but unmistakable. Mira stood in front of the lens, bundled in her red coat, smiling softly. Her eyes were tired but bright, full of something between love and resignation. The timestamp placed the photo just hours before her disappearance. It was a self-timer shot. In the lower corner, the faint shadow of another figure appeared, taller, darker, approaching from behind. "Daniel." Chen exhaled slowly. There was no blood, no violence in the frame, just that single haunting moment before everything changed. A captured heartbeat before fear took over. She printed the image and placed it gently into Mira's diary file. "You left proof," she whispered. "Even the mountains kept your truth." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, steady, endless. High on the ridge, wind swept through the pines, carrying the faint echo of a shutter click. One last photograph trapped in memory, frozen in time. And far below, at the edge of the trail, the wooden bench stood alone beneath the falling snow, a silent witness to love, betrayal, and the forest that remembered everything. The end.